I want to, I'm sure you'll be delighted by this, cast your mind back to your Chesham and Amersham by-election victory, and many congratulations on that. After that by-election victory, you said that all your efforts are going to be on blue wall seats. And you've also promised that you won't go into coalition with the Conservatives again. But why at this stage rule anything out? Why rule out any coalitions?
Well, I mean, first of all, we've got to not take the voters for granted in the way the Conservatives are. So in those blue wall seats you referred to, we are going really hard after sitting Conservative MPs. We think we can beat a lot of Conservative MPs. And by the way, the blue wall does extend in different parts of the country. We think we can beat Conservative MPs in Cheadle and Hazel Grove, in places like Harrogate. So there's a lot of Conservative MPs who we're going to go after. And given they've all broken their promise on the election about not putting up national insurance, we're finding already that that's having a real bad impact on their reputation, their constituencies. So we really are after a lot of Conservative MPs. In terms of a coalition, it's just so far away. These are hypothetical questions. What I am clear is Boris Johnson has sort of changed the Tory Party into a pretty incompetent, indecent and uncaring government. And not surprisingly, I won't have any truck with them.
You have been in coalition before. In fact, you personally have been in a coalition before. And I just wonder how much of that hangover from that coalition is still affecting you and your chances, and whether you think that voters do have a memory that the Lib Dems were in coalition with Conservatives, you yourself were, and whether you're trying to say, we've done that, we've been burnt by it, we won't do it again.
No, actually, my stance comes from listening to voters and listening to traditional Conservative voters. I mean, the Chesham and Amersham by-election, which I'm very happy to talk about because it was quite an extraordinary 25% swing from the Tories to us. I went there 16 times. I knocked on hundreds of doors, spoke to hundreds of people, mainly people who previously voted Conservative. And they were telling me that they'll never vote Conservative while Boris Johnson is the leader. They were saying they were quite astonished by the portrayal of business by the Conservatives. They felt the modern Conservative Party didn't share their values. So it's really not surprising the position I'm taking against the Conservatives. I'm dealing with the here and now, not the past, whatever happened in the past. Here and now is that lots of Conservatives, traditional Conservatives, don't want to vote for Boris Johnson's Conservative government. And the last thing they want to hear from me is we want to work with them. We don't want to work with them. We're different from them. And at our conference, we're setting out our agenda, which is going to be talking with an offer to parents, where about schooling their kids, to carers, to small business. And so, Daisy, that's what I want to get over. I want to get over the different difference between the Conservatives and us.
I do want to talk about parents, carers and small businesses. Again, I know that's your motto of this conference. But before that, just going back to Chesham and Amersham, by your own admission, planning was a huge deal in that constituency. You made a big speech to the local government association after that victory, saying that Liberal Democrats won the by-election by listening to people's concerns, and that Boris Johnson should do the same by ditching his ill-thought-through and undemocratic planning reforms. But it now looks like he's doing exactly that. He's listened to you, Ed Davey. He's moved Michael Gove into that brief, and Michael Gove, it looks like, will be ditching those planning reforms. So they've shot your fox, haven't they?
No, what they're showing is we're a real threat to them. They wouldn't be doing it if they didn't feel that we could take a lot of seats up in the blue wall. And let's see what they actually eventually come up with. Because Liberal Democrats, let's be clear, have always been in favour of building more homes because there is a housing crisis in our country. What we were saying in that debate, what we said in Chesham and Amersham, was these planning reforms were giving all the power to developers, taking power away from communities. They were taking away the obligations on developers to build affordable homes. They were doing exactly what Theresa May said they were going to do, build the wrong homes in the wrong places. And we have alternative proposals. Let's be really clear. We have, indeed, in the coalition government, we put in what are called neighbourhood planning ideas, where the community leads the house building. And those planning reforms that have been tried, that legal framework that we put in, where it's been tried, has resulted in more houses being built, more affordable houses being built, and more sustainable houses being built.
But this is one of the reasons why many people say that when Lib Dems are campaigning, door to door on the street, they do tend to say to people what those people want to hear. So those voters in Chesham and Amersham were very anti-HS2. Liberal Democrat candidate said, me too. They were very anti-new, lots and lots of new bills popping up all over their constituency. And the candidate said, me too, and sort of adopted their NIMBY-esque style without quite admitting that that wasn't the whole truth of Lib Dem policy. Lib Dem policy is pro-HS2 and is pro more housing.
I have to say, a lot of the voters in Chesham and Amersham say they were anti-Boris Johnson and anti-Conservatives take them for granted, and we agree with them. And on planning reforms, we were really clear. I mean, you can look at what Liberal Democrats do in local government. My wife is a housing portfolio holder in Kingston Council. She's building more houses. Difference is she's building council homes. She's building more affordable homes. I'm really proud of her. If you go to a council like South Cambs, Liberal Democrats are building actually more houses than the government actually asked them to do, but they're more affordable homes, they're more sustainable, environmentally friendly homes, and they're working with the local community. So I think that is a really strong record, actually, of working with communities, listening to communities, and taking them with us. I think that's a really good idea.
And if you've been listening to those communities, and as you said, you're going hard after Tory voters or traditional Tory voters, obviously a lot of those voters were Brexiteers. Your stance on Brexit was very, very difficult to misinterpret. It was vehemently and fundamentally anti-Brexit. You wanted to reverse the decision of the referendum. You've changed that view now. You've softened that view. Is that because you're appealing to those Tories?
Well, I don't think we've changed. We remain very strongly pro-European. We've always been a party that believes in European cooperation. And I think as people see the mess that's happening in our country with the shortage of lorry drivers, the shortage of food processing staff, the shortage of abattoirs, the problems at the ports, the fact that business is just crying out. I think, as a leader of pro-European opinion, we'll be seeing a lot more people agreeing with that position. So I want to.
But you no longer want to reverse the result of the referendum.
Well, I'm focused on the issues of today. And the issues of today is we have an economy in a complete mess.
But do you want to reverse the decision of the referendum? That's the third time I've asked you, and I'm still not clear. I thought you had changed your stance on that. I thought you'd moved away from your 2019 manifesto.
Look, it won't be a surprise to anybody that Liberal Democrats are absolutely committed to European cooperation. We want, and I've said this really clearly, we want Britain to be back at the heart of Europe. That is the party's policy. I totally
you want to rejoin
it.
the EU?
Well, that's not an issue for today, is it? Today is the issue, is the lorry driver shortage, the problems at the ports, the problems with our farms, the supermarket shelves being empty, the crisis we're seeing in so many parts of our businesses. And we really need to tackle that. We need to come up with solutions to that. The Brexit deal that was agreed by the Conservatives is a bad deal. That is what we need to deal with. We have a long-term policy. Let's be clear. We passed it at our conference last September. We've said in the long term, Liberal Democrats want Britain to be members of the European Union again. It's there in black and white. We're hardly hiding it from anybody.
Does that mean a second referendum? You're still being honest.
No other party has been so clear on our long-term objective, but I think it's not unreasonable. Voters want us to know what we're going to do now, and we want to put recovery first. And the economy has gone through a sort of heart attack. There are so many problems. I've rarely remember a time when there've been so many problems in our economy. And Liberal Democrats quite unashamedly want to put recovery first. Recovery for our children, recovery for carers, and recovery for business.
Well, we've touched on business there, and we'll touch on children and parents in a minute, but I specifically want to talk to you about carers and caring. This is something that you have a lifetime of experience with. Your father died when you were 4, your mother was diagnosed with terminal illness and you cared for her for 3 years until she died when you were 15, and you continue to be a carer to this day. You obviously have a lot to say on this subject, but you've started only recently to talk about this very personal, very private area of your life. And I wonder, is that a hard thing for you to do? You've always appeared to be quite a private person.
It was a big decision I made, and I made it with my wife, Emily, and we did it actually before I decided to run for the Liberal Democrat leadership, because I feel that politicians need to open up about who they are, what's made them who they are. But also, I genuinely feel there is a huge crisis in social care, yes, but in a crisis for the lack of support for family carers. And these family carers, and the estimates are suggesting maybe 9 to 10 million of them, do an incredible job. Often they don't even think that they're carers, right? I'm not sure if when I was looking after my mum, thought myself as a carer, but I was. And they don't have a voice. And partly it's because they're so exhausted and stressed out and emotionally wrung out by the caring that they're doing, that they never get a chance to go and talk to their council or MP or campaign. And because I do have an insight to whether it's caring for someone who's ill and dying, someone who's elderly when I looked after my nana, or someone who, looking after my disabled son, that insight, I think, I need to put it to the use for all those carers out there who haven't got the platform that I've got. So yes, it was a difficult decision to decide to talk about it, but to be honest, I think it would have been cowardly not to.
And what difference do you think it has made to you as a politician, not just with your opinion and view on how best to support carers, but on all of your political views, having, as I said, looking after your mother till you were 15 and then being looked after by your grandmother, as you just mentioned, and then losing her? A lot of people would say that wouldn't turn you into a politician, because it would shape your life so much that perhaps you would go into a caring profession.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure the impact it had on my decision, because my decision to become a politician, I'm not saying I wasn't sort of one of these people who got out a piece of paper at university and planned a political career. I sort of almost fell into politics. Originally, I was going to do everything from being a journalist, Daisy, to working in developing countries as an economist, because economics is my background. And I sort of ended up in politics, ended up with the Liberal Democrats because they were the party who most shared my views on things like the environment and things like political reform, because I think our country's politics is in a mess. So, it wasn't, it didn't sort of affect me in that way, because politics wasn't a sort of planned end. I think the difference it's made is in my attitude to life and my attitude to people. I like to think, it's up for others to judge, but I like to think I have a lot of empathy with people, particularly people who are struggling. And as a constituency MP for 20 years, you help lots of people because they're in, sometimes in real crisis. And I think, having been there myself, I like to think I've got some sort of feeling for those challenges. And I think in modern politics, which, if I'm honest with you, Daisy, I think has gone down some very bad routes, very divisive routes, very pleasant routes, where we're not thinking about people as human beings in the way we should do. I think the need to empathize with other human beings has never been stronger, and that needs to come into our politics.
And I know you've been talking about the huge amount of time you have to devote to looking after your little boy, and that must be difficult to juggle with such a demanding job.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, my wife is amazing. We have to have paid carer support, which we pay for, and we're very fortunate to be able to pay for them. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why I worry for all those people who aren't as fortunate as we are. We have a supportive family. We have enough resources to pay for some care support. But I know lots of people through my constituency work, and actually last year I've been speaking to a lot of carers across the whole country. And the more I talk to people who have got these family caring responsibilities, the more you realize that actually caring is quite strongly associated with people having low incomes and not a lot of money. Because often they're not able to work, or not able to work as long as they would be able to. They're not able to, sometimes the person they're caring for would have been working, and so a 2-income household turns to a no-income household. So I think caring about carers is an issue that's right in itself because it's about the health of our nation and the well-being of our people, but it's actually also about dealing with poverty. There's an awful lot of people who are caring who get forgotten out of the debate about social justice and fairness.
And so perhaps in a way similar to the planning laws that you've been asking the government to change, you have been talking about carers, and government is putting forward proposals on social care, and they're going to fund that from national insurance contributions.
Yeah, I mean, I was been really hoping that we'd have a decent package of reforms for social care that would be able to command consensus. Indeed, the Prime Minister said he wanted to work cross-party, and I wrote him 3 times saying, you know, we're ready, we're happy to talk to you, we've got a bit of experience, can I put that to some positive use? But he didn't take up the offer, having said he was going to. And then he's come up with a package of reforms which neither fix social care nor are fair. And so there's not going to be consensus behind them, which is a real tragedy.
So you'll vote against it?
Well, we have done in terms of the national insurance levy, because let me explain why. The cap on social care costs benefits the richest the most, because the people who've got the most valuable houses, who often tend to be older people inevitably, they are going to be protected hugely. And I'm not against having some protection on that. I've argued for it. But what I've never argued for is putting all the costs on lower paid people and younger people, which is exactly what the national insurance levy does. And so this is an unfair and unsustainable way to fund the social care package that is so needed. It's helping older, wealthier people at the expense of lower paid younger people. That is just not right, and we will oppose it. And the fact, and the, sorry, I'm happy to continue, Daisy, up to you.
No, sorry, I know that I'm being told off for holding you for too long, so and I do.
Okay, all right.
There are a couple of areas that I am very keen to cover up, and I'm sure you will be too. You've said that you're going to be on the side of parents as well. That's one of your slogans. Let's talk about parents and children getting the vaccine. Do you agree with the idea that teenagers between 12 and 16 can decide for themselves whether or not they get the COVID vaccine? Or do you think that parents should have a say in that?
What we've done is we've always supported the scientific advice throughout this pandemic. And that advice has to come from both the scientists, the medics, as well as the behavioral experts. And I think, therefore, that is the right approach. I think children should have a big say in what happens to them, particularly when they're of secondary school age.
But a 12-year-old deciding whether to have a vaccine, won't they just do whatever everyone else in the playground is doing?
Well, if the behavioural experts have recommended that, I mean, I think we have to understand that. And
it occurs to me that the behavioural experts want as many people to be vaccinated as possible. And the behavioural experts know that a lot of the parents of these children are hesitant, are vaccine hesitant. So therefore, they think they can just leapfrog over the parents and go direct to the children. And that doesn't seem right to a lot of people.
Well, we've had a consistent position throughout this, and I don't see why we should change it now. And that consistent position has been to listen to experts. And I would have thought most parents, if not the vast majority of parents, will not only want their children to be safe and to be vaccinated, but to listen to the experts. I am genuinely worried, Daisy, that there's been an awful lot of time given to the anti-vaxxers. I'm very worried that on social media, completely incorrect information, misinformation, in some cases, quite wrong information has been put out there, and we need to protect people and protect our children from that.
Okay, so you're in agreement with that policy. What about this issue? On Friday, the Bell v Tavistock verdict on puberty blockers came out. So again, this was saying that children, should be given the option to start their puberty blockers treatment without parental consent. Do you agree with that?
It's a really important judgment. I think, like most responsible politicians, I'm going to read it. It's been highly controversial. I'm afraid because I've been working so hard on our conference, Daisy, I haven't really studied it. I will do, and let's have a chat about it again when I have done.
Well, I know one thing you have studied is the trans issue, which is obviously related to that verdict. You said just yesterday that you were adamant that women's safe spaces or women's toilets or whatever it might be should be open to trans women. Those opinions which you have adopted are very, very absolute. You are firmly on the side of the trans lobby, if you like, but a lot of women are scared for their own safety and think that this issue should be discussed more, and that you're too firmly on the one side without being concerned about women's safety and women's issues.
Well, there is a big debate in Parliament across parties about how we should ensure that people's rights are protected. And it does start from an issue of recognising that people who are trans are some of the most persecuted, harassed, discriminated people in our society. And that I've talked to Conservative MPs, Labour MPs, indeed, people who are experts who are saying, look, we need to find a way to have a grown-up debate about this, which deals with the reality and the harassment that trans people feel. And, you know, I would welcome the Prime Minister taking more of a lead on this, because it is a tricky issue for people who haven't sort of studied it in detail. I think people are genuinely trying to understand, and having thought about it a lot, having spoken to people in other political parties who are all trying to work out how we change the law that is it fair and protects people. I think the Prime Minister, it's time that he did more. I slightly worry, if I'm honest with you, Daisy, that there are people in number 10 who are using issues like trans rights to wage a culture war. And the reason I worry about that is I think we need to bring the country together, particularly with COVID being so devastating. And I'd like to see a Prime Minister with a bit of more statesmanship, who is not allowing something like the culture war to rip people apart and target people, particularly people who are in minorities.